Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Starting in the Atlantic region and yet another chapter in the fight against Mi'kmaq exercising their treaty rights. The commercial lobster fishing season kicked off in Cape Breton, and it was also the first day a Mikmaw First Nation began fishing lobster for a moderate livelihood. But hours after the traps went in, the Department of Fisheries seized them. Angel Moore reports.
This is Evan Johnson and his crew heading out to drop lobster traps, only to find the next morning the Department of Fisheries seizing his 37 traps.
I said, our plan that we adopted, everything was signed off on, and I wouldn't have been issued my tags if it wasn't okay for us to go. And he said, well, according to what we were told, that these ain't valid.
Bolidec's Chief Wilbert Marshall was not available for a comment. However, the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs said in a statement, not only was the harvester in full accordance with community's regulations, but the harvester was also fishing within DFO's dictated commercial season. And this seizure is a failure of the Government of Canada to accommodate our rights and a failure to uphold the honour of the Crown. Last fall, Bolidec was one of the Mi'kmaq communities to launch their treaty fishery. Community member Craig Doucette took part in the launch, but his traps were seized.
It's just so belittling. I have no other way. It's like it's easy for them. Like it's a classic bully. The classic bully. The government's coming after us, little guys, and what can we do?
He is facing charges stemming back to 2019, fishing out of season and without a license.
We're not bad people, you know what I mean? Like, we're not a bunch of criminals out trying to make trouble. We're just out trying to make money for our family and, you know, to get by, so to speak.
The Minister of Fisheries stated last March the moderate livelihood fishery must occur during the commercial season. Yet Bolidec's spring season is within the commercial season, off St. Peter's Bay on the southern coast of Cape Breton. Meanwhile, Johnson vows to keep dropping traps.
First person to put our traps in, first person to lose our traps. So I hope it doesn't keep up like this. The more they take, the more I'm going to set.
The Department of Fisheries said in an emailed statement, any fishing without an unauthorized DFO license is subject to enforcement action. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabukduk, also known as Halifax.
Two MLAs from the Yukon's Conservative Party are in hot water after an exchange of text messages went public over the weekend. Here's APTN's Sarah Connors with a look at what was said and how their party is reacting.
On Friday, two elected members of the Yukon party sent offensive text messages to a group of people that included Yukon Liberal leader Sandy Silver. In the exchange, Yukon party MLAs Stacey Hazard and Wade Ischenko make remarks about Silver, NDP leader Kate White, and their own leader Curry Dixon. In one message, Ischenko appears to imply Silver likes young girls, stating Sandy likes the young ones. Today, Yukon party leader Curry Dixon condemned the text messages and the MLAs who sent them. He says Hazard and Ischenko will not be allowed to sit on any legislative committees, nor will they be given critic roles when the Yukon party establishes a shadow cabinet. Hazard and Ischenko have also issued public apologies for their remarks. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, later this week, Red Dress Day will remind everyone of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It's also been nearly 2 years since the MMIWG report came out with an action plan. During question period, NDP MP Leah Gazan asked Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett when a plan will be put into action.
And every time I try and get an update from the minister, she tells me she's working on it. Another woman goes missing or murdered. I'm working on it. A girl goes missing, leaving their family searching for their loved one. We're making progress. A 2S LGBTQIA individual is beaten. I'm working on it. This liberal stalling is costing lives. When will this government release a national action plan to address this ongoing genocide?
Honourable Minister. I thank the member for her concern, and our hearts are with all the families and survivors in this ongoing tragedy. There is no question that the 100 Indigenous women and Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA plus people working on this plan were very, very pleased to see $2.2 billion put in last week's budget to be able to put in place the concrete actions that will stop this tragedy.
We want to hear what you think about progress made on the MMIW inquiry. Calls to action. Here's how you can continue the conversation. Share your voice by sending your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can follow APTN News and join in the conversation and see our latest stories. The safe consumption site in Saskatoon is open, but it's only operating from 9 to 5. They've asked for additional funding from the province to extend those hours, but were denied. APTN's Priscilla Wolf explains how business hours don't work for drug consumption sites.
The number of overdoses have surged in Saskatchewan during the pandemic, yet Saskatchewan's only safe consumption site can only operate during office hours because of a lack of funding. Jason Mercredi, the executive director of Prairie Harm Reduction, says they were relying on additional funding to extend their hours.
Originally, we put in 4 budget allotments, one at $400,000 to operate during the day, one at $600,000 to operate in the evenings, one at $900,000 to operate daytime and then until midnight, and then one at $1.3 million to operate 24/7.
With no additional funding, they have turned to fundraising efforts.
To be able to continue operation of the safe consumption site. And, you know, we were pretty surprised at the response that we got from the business community and from donors, but it's been like overwhelming the amount of support we've received so far.
APTN was sent this statement from the government of Saskatchewan when asked why Prairie Harm Reduction didn't receive the additional funding. Prairie Harm Reduction also receives annual funding from the Ministry of Social Services for additional outreach and support programs. We understand that addressing overdoses in Saskatchewan cannot be a one-size-fits-all strategy, and that is why we continue to collaborate with stakeholders across the province. Mercredi adds what they do receive is not enough to run 24/7 as needed. As in the case of Kimberly Squirrel, who died near the consumption site of an overdose in late January. It's people like Kimberly Squirrel that they are trying to help save.
I think sometimes people forget that there's names behind these overdose numbers, and you know, when Kimberly should still be here today, it's incredibly frustrating.
Mercredi adds, if Prairie Harm Reduction was running 24/7, it could have saved her life.
You know, if we had provincial funding, yeah, it's tough to argue that she wouldn't be alive today because, you know, she died 600 meters roughly from our building.
Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Time for a quick break, but first a story we are working on for you tomorrow in British Columbia, where Indigenous students' high school graduation rates are climbing steadily. Reporter Lee Wilson finds out why.
Teachers from the Nisga'a Nation in northern BC sing and drum at their school. High school completion rates have improved nearly 20% in the last 5 years.
My impression is that there has been more of a focus on language and culture and making connections with students, increased celebration and ceremony at school.
They say students having more input in grad requirements has also played a role.
Well, they're much more engaged and much more successful when they see themselves reflected in the curriculum and what they're learning about.
I'm Lee Wilson. We'll have the story soon on APTN National News.
Welcome back. The federal government has reached a cash agreement with the Manitoba Metis Federation over the sale of the former Kapiong Barracks in Winnipeg to 7 Treaty 1 First Nations. The MMF filed a lawsuit in 2019, barely after the ink was dry on the deal, claiming that Canada did not properly consult with Métis before signing over the land to the First Nations. The former military barracks was closed in 2004. For more than a decade, the Treaty 1 First Nations had battled it in court for it, saying that they should get first dibs as part of their treaty land entitlement. In the summer of 2019, Canada signed off on giving them the land, but 2 months later, the MMF asked a federal court to rule on the decision to leave out the Métis. Today's cash agreement includes the MMF withdrawing that lawsuit. All other details are confidential. We are joined now by Manitoba Metis Federation President David Chartrand. President Chartrand, thanks for joining us. You know, Winnipeggers, Manitobans might be familiar with this whole land dispute at the former military base here. It's going to be an urban reserve in Winnipeg. But, you know, for our national audience, can you explain why the MMF took issue with it and went to court?
Well, firstly, the federal government is not only looking at Capwing, they're looking at all their federal crown lands that exist in the, for us, of course, in the prairies. And this particular site was on the radar. And given they're shutting down the military operations, and they're going to try to figure out what they're going to do with the Crown land. And the new relationship that Canada has, actually, they sit down with the governments, the Indigenous governments, and negotiate unused Crown lands or capital-size facilities that they want to sell. Mm-hmm. And so they usually include the Indigenous governments. However, in this particular situation, we were excluded on that negotiation or discussion off the start.
You know, the news release didn't disclose details of what the agreement entails. What can you tell us? What are the Métis getting?
Well, clearly what we're getting is a fair and just settlement. As everybody knows, we took the federal government to court on the premise the Métis were being left out when it comes to Section 35 rights and duty to consult. So, however, at the same time, we supported Treaty 1 and their vision and where they wanted to go. So we had some dialogues with Chief Meaches and the rest of the First Nations on Treaty 1, and we worked together to support their initiative, at the same time respecting my position of where I was going. And Canada did the right thing. Instead of spending millions in the courts fighting this thing back and forth, they decided to do the right thing, as the courts have already warned them. Do your job as elected officials and get these things done, but bringing them to the courts to settle for you. So that's the right approach.
Yeah. Well, and back in 2019, of course, that's when you filed in court to stop the Capwing urban reserve development. Lots of speculation back then about it being a slap in the face to those Treaty 1 First Nations who themselves had been battling for years for that government surplus land. You know, can you speak to the relationship that the MMF has with those Treaty 1 First Nations?
Oh, very good relationship. We just finished a meeting last week together. And as I echoed to you and people listening on the show, I did not just file a case in July 19. I actually sat and spoke with the First Nations and Treaty 1 and expressed to them what was happening on our side, of course, and at the same time we have dual respect for each other and the concept of our rights, and so we wanted to find a balance, and they understood where I was going, and I indicated publicly at the same time I would never hinder their progress on their attempt to establish their reserve in an urban environment. So again, that's something I'm actually working on other First Nations with right now on future partnerships, including gas bars and so forth, on some of the lands I'm purchasing right now. It's a win-win-win. All three parties are successful at the end of the day, and I think it's great for all of us.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, and just before airtime, spokesperson for the Treaty 1 Chiefs, Dennis Meaches, sent out a press release congratulating the MMF for that deal. Well, it is time for us to take another break, but still ahead, the traditional territory of Acho-Denico spans over British Columbia, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. With borders being closed, community members who are used to traveling for things like hand game tournaments and supplies, and even elections are more isolated than ever. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs checks in this week to the southwest point of the Northwest Territories.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, reporting from beautiful Fort Liard, Northwest Territories. This week, I'll bring you stories of opportunity, community, culture, politics.
I applied to go home, but then they denied me. I had to pay for it, but I can't pay.
And more. That's coming up soon on APTN National News.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. APTN News' own social media editor Jesse Andrushko described this as a goose, a majestic, deadly beast. Remember to not get too close while you're filming wildlife for our photo of the day. And you can keep those pictures coming. Email them to share@aptn.ca to be our next photo of the day. And don't forget to include the whole who, what, when, where, and why of your photo. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast.
Off to the east coast, we got sunshine in 16 for Fredericton, 10 and some showers expected for St. John's. Happy Valley, Goose Bay and Cartwright, 6 degrees, cloud there, sunshine in Kuujjuaq at 7. Settles, 9 degrees and sunny skies, 12 for Quebec City and sunshine there. Toronto, rain and 16 degrees, rain as well for Ottawa, 15. 16 for Sioux Lookout, mix of sun and cloud in Big Trout Lake and 3 degrees expected. Sunshine for the Paw, that's the only place. 6 degrees, 0 and snow for Churchill. But sunny in southern Manitoba. Barons River, 7 degrees. Dauphin, 10 and sunshine. 12 and sunny for Saskatoon and Regina. 13 and sunshine expected for North Battleford. 11 and sunny for Meadow Lake. Up in Stony Rapids, 3 and sunny. Rain and 13 degrees expected for Peace River. Fort Chip, sunshine and 8. 10 and some showers expected for Edmonton, cloudy down south to 14 in Medicine Hat, 16 in rain for Kamloops, 15 in sunshine for Quesnel. Prince George, sunny and 12 degrees expected, 9 in showers for Dease Lake. Mayo and Dawson City, both rain and 12 degrees, 8s for Watson Lake and Whitehorse. 14 and sunny for Fort Simpson, cloud and 14 for Fort Liard. 1 and sunny for Fort McPherson. Paulatuck, snow, -5. 0 for Baker Lake and Chesterfield with a chance of flurries. Same with Arviat. Kenite, mix of sun and cloud and 3 degrees. Igloolik, -1 and clear skies. Clear is well for Clyde River at -2.
Today, the hotly anticipated report critiquing Quebec's child welfare laws was made public. The Laurent Commission spent 2 years collecting testimony from First Nations and Inuit stakeholders. And for many, the newly published summary report reads a lot like déjà vu. Lindsay Richardson runs it down for us.
We waited 2 years for the Laurent Commission report to drop, and according to its summary, the child welfare issues it addresses have persisted well over 40 years. Several commissions have already discussed the stakes. The solutions are known. It's time to act.
Nous sommes d'avis que les Premières Nations et les Inuits sont les mieux placés pour identifier les besoins de leurs enfants et y répondre.
Only 2 of the summary report's 126 pages are Indigenous specific, but according to the report's authors, there's a reason. Quote, all Indigenous participants told us it's useless to redo the work of previous commissions, like the VA Commission, the MMIWG Commission, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and even the 1996 Royal Commission, all pointing to Indigenous self-determination when it comes to children.
We don't have a lot of new recommendation. The only recommendation we have is that just do what the other commission have proposed.
On Monday, Laurent Commission officials admitted youth protection laws can be discriminatory, but they don't believe systemic racism is the problem.
We're not going there. What we are saying is very simple, is as far as they are concerned, put them on the decision table and put them as active person who will decide what kind of structure, what kind of law, what kind of services they need, and they will do so.
Except it's not that simple. Quebec issued a court challenge over a federal law giving First Nations and Inuit charge of their own child welfare. And Quebec is also one of the only Canadian provinces that hasn't restricted birth alerts. The list is long, and no budget or timeline has been announced. But as Le Bon sees it,
I think we need more leadership than money.
The report does make two general recommendations that could impact Indigenous kids. The first is to draft a children's charter to put their rights on paper. The second is to appoint a government commissioner to fight for these specific rights. And in the words of AFNQL Regional Chief Ghislain Picard, we are counting on the full cooperation of the Government of Quebec in this regard. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
Thanks, Lindsay. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to play out in the three territories, but each one is having a very different experience. There are 0 active cases in the Yukon. There are 8 active cases in the Northwest Territories, with 12 more suspected. That outbreak just led to schools in Yellowknife closing. And then there's Nunavut. There are 85 active cases of COVID-19 in Nunavut. 81 of those are in the capital of Iqaluit. Positive cases have been found in the local prison, at the residence for medical travelers, and one local shelter has closed after a staff member tested positive. Iqaluit had their first case of COVID-19 on April 15th of this year. Well, the province of Manitoba has expanded priority vaccination eligibility to include Métis people over the age of 18. Until now, they weren't part of the priority eligibility for Indigenous Manitobans. Only First Nations were. The Manitoba Metis Federation have been calling on the province to expand the eligibility for months. The expansion only applies to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines at super sites, pop-up clinics, or urban Indigenous clinics. Manitoba's top doctor says there are currently 2,500 active cases, and the decision was made to include those most at risk, which now include all Indigenous people.
Just like our vaccine program, the targeted approach, we want to try to protect those most at risk, and especially those most at risk of severe outcomes. So the idea is that we're going to see that disproportionate effect somewhat offset, and that's what we're looking for, the equity in the battle against COVID. We don't want to see groups that are disproportionately affected, and we're going to target our vaccine campaign in that manner, and it's also the best way to reduce the impact on our healthcare system.
Hundreds of Albertans were lined up for 2 or 3 kilometers at the Canada-U.S. border to receive Pfizer and Moderna vaccines donated by the Blackfeet Nation in Montana. With the majority of the Blackfeet Nation already vaccinated, they held a drive-through vaccination clinic for Canadians looking to get their first or second dose. This was the second clinic held by the Blackfeet tribe to help Canadians, and they hope to have even more. APTN will have more on this vaccine goodwill tomorrow. Well, that is a wrap on your news to kick off the week. Hit up our website, aptnnews.ca, if you've missed anything in the past few days and you need to catch up on Indigenous news from across the country. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.